Hi, thanks for joining us today. This is Stronger Roots Podcast, and today we have a very special guest. We are so excited to have Sherry. We have Sherry Platt with us today. I'll read a little bit about her. I was once called the Queen of Transformation and Change, and I love the title, so I kept it. My official title, however, is Women's Change Coach. I focus on helping women 40 and beyond navigate the many changes in their lives, from career transitions, leaving negative relationships, to coming out about their true sexual identities, dealing with empty nest, and practicing spiritual empowerment. I believe that sovereign, brilliant, aligned, and powerful women will heal the world once they've healed themselves. With over 20 years of experience in corporate, academic, and nonprofit leadership, along with decades of spiritual practice, a master's degree in counseling, and advanced training in shamanism, Kabbalism, Eastern philosophy, and psychedelic integration, I help women reclaim their power and create lives that feel grounded, joyful, and fully aligned. Sherry's work supports her personal evolution, because when you become who you are meant to be, the world benefits. Welcome, Sherry. We're so happy to have you.
And I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Sherry, what a impressive resume there.
I know it sounded good, didn't it? I was like, I gotta meet her.
I love the shamanism aspect too. So,
Yeah.
so how did you get into that? What kind of drew you to the holistic, healing side of things?
I think I was just born that way, to be perfectly honest. I think when we say shamanism, I mean, we could have a whole discussion about that. I think it's more of having the earth be our teacher, learning from the plants, learning from believing in ourselves, believing in the visions that we have, the intuitiveness, all of that. But I have specifically studied with shamans. I lived in Northern California for 30 years, so I had a lot of exposure to some of the really Michael Horner in particular, who was around for a really long time, offered classes through UC Berkeley, and we practiced shamanic journeying, which is without any kind of hallucinogenic. And it's just became interwoven into everything. I'm liminal. I live in many different worlds at one time. So I worked in corporate, I was a counselor, and I always practiced shamanism or different forms of natural inspirations, just to say. So, but also Eastern philosophy, meditation, Vipassana meditation. I am also an interfaith spiritual director, and my teacher was the wife of one of the great Kabbalists of our time. So I've had a lot of really good exposure to, but they all come to one thing. I mean, you can get teachings from different places. It always comes to down to one or two things, just different interpretations. And the reason why I like having these different methodology is that when somebody comes to me, I can meet them where they're at and help them where they need and want to go based on. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend psilocybin for everybody, but meditation perhaps, or some kind of a physical activity. So I meet people. I have the ability to meet people where they are in a variety of different ways.
Wonderful.
And it's just who I am.
Yeah.
That's the answer to your question. It's just, and we can talk more about that. I mean, I believe a lot in the power of spiritual empowerment. So I'll tie that in as we go along.
Yeah, I love how you mentioned that you exist in different worlds. You're a counselor, you're corporate, you're, spiritual side of that. And I feel like a lot of us women do hold different hats.
You
And
betcha. I
yeah,
mean, I'm also a psychic and a channel, so I have multiple worlds that I
wonderful.
receive. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and most women are. I mean, most women are highly intuitive. I mean,
Mhm.
it ties into our conversation, but we've been shut down in a number of different ways by a very patriarchal society that doesn't just negatively impact women; it negatively impacts men as well. So, if you can't access your intuition, then other people have control over your life.
Yeah. I started reading, there's a really amazing book, Women Who Run with
Oh
Wolves.
yeah, of course, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty.
Estes, ESTS is her last name or
Yes,
something. Yeah.
yes, that
Yeah.
was a really, really good book.
Yeah.
So Sherry, let me ask you what, because our platform is about stronger roots and we deal with a lot of different topics that are kind of hard to talk about. You mentioned that in your TikTok, that you were a survivor of narcissistic parents. So can you kind of talk about how that shaped you as a person and the work that you're doing today?
Yeah. Well, it was everything, right?
Mhm.
So, I mean, growing up, I didn't know the word narcissism, and I didn't know there was anything wrong either, by the way. So I had a mother who was a Holocaust survivor, and that severely damaged her psyche. And I had a father who was a poverty kid, and I suspect many things happened to him that damaged his psyche. And together they formed a very, he was a, rage. There's a scale of narcissism, right? So if you have a scale, he was more of a grandiose narcissist. And she, I think, was probably more borderline and also a narcissist as well. So I don't know if you can do both at the same time, but I think she was borderline and he was a narcissist, and they're often very drawn to each other.
Mhm.
So that explained a lot. So how did it affect me? It made me very codependent. It gave me a false sense of control over other people, and uh, it prohibited me from being truly happy, I think. And because when you try to control other people, you can't be happy and not truly happy. And it set the path for therapy. So when I was 28, I had two close friends tell me that they were concerned that I had a very limited range of emotions, but they could see the bigger part of me and they wondered what was up. So I went into therapy, and that's where I learned the term saving the parent. So it sounded like, well, sure, he beat us, but he also let me use the car whenever I wanted to.
Mhm.
And yeah, he was a rager, or she could be a very vicious person, but we also snuggled at night and watched TV together. So it's very confusing, as I think it is for a lot of people who are involved with narcissists. For me, that was normal. So it wasn't until somebody actually said, so that's not normal. That's called saving the parent, and children do that so they feel safe. So you can treat me like crap, but because you're my parent and in the early years you're God, right? I will make excuses for you, and I will make my own mental gymnastics to make sense of what you're doing to make you right and me wrong.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
then that pattern follows you throughout your life unless you become aware of it and stop it.
Mhm.
So I would say that was a big influence. And I think, I also was really into neuropsychology at a very young age, except we weren't calling it neuropsychology. It was more like what happens with people with brain trauma and strokes. And it's always been something I was interested in. So I just then studied counseling eventually, and continued the path through Eastern philosophy. Talks a lot about mindfulness. I think they were probably the first to really put the discussions of neurology out into the open, but without the scientific terms. And it just led the path. I'm
Mhm.
grateful for everything. I'm grateful for being raised by two very damaged people,
Mhm.
because it set the course for my own healing and awareness so that I can also help other people. Yeah.
So coming to terms with two very damaged parents, how
Mhm.
was that? I mean, what was
It was a process.
I was gonna say, I don't think it's a flip of a switch type thing. I think
No,
it's a coming undone, isn't it?
yeah,
Just
yeah.
the
When I work with clients, I mean, I'll have people say, "I don't understand. I've been working on myself for 10 years and this is still up." I'm like, "Hey, this is life." Like this, everybody thinks there has to be this big purpose to life, but really the purpose of life is just to evolve.
Mhm.
That's it. There's no big secrets.
Right.
So, yeah, because also if you look at the brain will hold on to trauma until it thinks you're ready for it. Right. So it's like it picks it up and sticks it somewhere and says, when Sherry's ready, I'll start to release this. And then I'll release this. And by the way, from a shamanic perspective, that's called soul loss. And so the belief is that when we are traumatized or have that, we actually take parts of ourselves and send it away so it's safe.
Mhm.
And then when we're ready, we retrieve it. So Western, yeah, it's very similar. So it was hard. It was a lot of work. We could have a whole nother conversation about what happens when narcissistic parents start to die, because I feel that was the site, like the video on narcissism did really well on TikTok, but so did the one. I still get people who are going back to the one on how to deal with a narcissistic parent's death.
Mhm.
And it's a journey.
Yeah.
So lots of therapy, codependent recovery, meditation, Buddhist influence, shamanic practices, and radical acceptance.
Yeah.
Radical acceptance.
Yeah, so you packed a whole lot of stuff in there. I'm
I
like, oh
did.
my gosh, ask her about this, ask her
Go
about.
ahead, ask away.
But what you were saying is that the brain kind of holds all of these memories, and I kind of equate it to being in shock or frozen.
Exactly
I
what it
mean,
is.
because then you remember when you start to get to like a safe spot or a healthier spot in life, you start to remember certain things, and it's like this memory floats out, and then you're dealing with that. It's like healing truly is, I've heard it being referred to as like an onion, being like there's layers
Yeah,
of that.
that's recovery conversation. Yeah, it's peeling the onion, and that's a great analogy. So it's just a constant like, okay, okay, okay. And
Yeah,
you're right. I mean, it's actually healthy disassociation is good for us,
yeah,
right? Especially as children, you can't manage that. It's not good for the brain. It would like explode the brain trying to make sense of it. So it goes away until your brain is mature enough to be able to handle the information as it comes in. And I actually use healthy disassociation often. I think if you're in control of your dissociation, it can actually be a really great tool,
yeah,
to create a healthy separation between you and the person or between you and the event, to go back and retrieve yourself afterwards. But I think once you have some control over that, it can be very powerful. But yes, you are correct. That is what happens with the brain.
yeah. And then why do you think that narcissistic people and codependents or
Mhm.
empaths have this special kind of dance that they do?
Yeah,
I mean, what?
because I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just so intrigued by that because it's almost like, I need somebody to really explain that. Why is it that
Sure.
narcissists and empaths are like magnets, and
Right.
they continuously try to, it's almost like one person has all these wonderful, attributes, and then the other person is lacking that. So they come together. How is that?
Yeah.
How do you explain that?
So let's look at what causes narcissism, and look at empathic versus codependent. Okay. So, what causes narcissism is profound wounding early in life and lack of attachment. So that wounding causes so much shame that the narcissist will cover it up and not accept any of it. So when you are dealing with a narcissist, you are dealing with someone who has extreme shame and can't look at it and is so damaged that they're very unlikely to look at it. I mean, they're really close to being sociopaths or antisocial personality disorder. And we can talk about the difference down the road if that's important, but so that you have to look at that. They have no resources. There are no internal resources. It's empty inside. So along comes now we'll put that over there. Now let's define empathic and codependent. Empaths are often highly intuitive people that have the ability to step into another person's energetic field and feel them. Now, an empath, if you are an empath, your healthy job is to go in, gather the information, and exit with the information. What happens with most empaths is that they walk into the energy field, they look around and think, I can change this. And that's the hook. Okay. And that's when it begins to lead into codependency. Codependency is on the scale of narcissism. So it doesn't look like it because codependents are, I mean, I'm a recovering codependent, so I'm just going to throw that in there. But codependents really believe that if they do something, give something, change themselves, they can change another person. That's narcissism.
Mhm.
So it's if we're going to scale, it's over here, where grandiose is over here, and codependents often have an awareness of what's happening, or can have an awareness and they can heal themselves, right? But narcissists never get there.
Yeah.
So what happens is the narcissist needs to have their energy filled all the time because they can't fill it themselves. They also need somebody they can blame for their shame. So you have a codependent or a high empath who hasn't learned how to manage their energy or manage their gifts, who actually thinks that if they do something, they can change this. Also, those people have a wound that the narcissist knows how to superficially and initially, called love bombing, right? Charisma, that they can sort of shine the light, and the codependent's finally seen and loved. Codependency is a person usually trying to control another person to get love and safety.
Wow.
That's where codependency comes from. So if they find somebody who's big, and my dad was very charismatic and very masculine, and women were very drawn to him.
Yeah.
And my mother needed saving, Holocaust survivor, small child, right? So here's this strong street kid guy, right, who feels very safe. And here's this victim who he can save. And there, so that's what causes it. And so that's why there's an energetic flow. And this is actually important to know because this is how you also break away from narcissists. So there's an energetic flow that's one way where the codependent or the empath is constantly feeding the narcissist, and the narcissist loves that because they can't produce it on their own. And that's what causes it.
It's scary. I mean, you know,
That's a
trying,
lot.
yeah, I know.
My mind is like blown. I'm just like wow.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, we can look at it energetically too. The narcissist is just a deep, dark hole, right? And so the empath is like, oh, I can feel that here, because I can fix you. I think a lot of us are seduced by potential. So like, oh, if I do this, then he'll do this. And by the way, lots of women are narcissists too. And I think codependent men do the same thing. Right. If I do this, then she'll do that. But the eye-opening experience, and trust me, it was not an easy one to look at, is that codependency is a form of narcissism, right? So the narcissist tries to convince me that if I'm good enough, he'll love me, right? He's trying to convince the grandiose father is if I get the good grades, then he'll love me. If I go into the insurance industry and skip college, then he'll love me. If he does this, then he'll love. So there's a love is transactional. And so I'm like, oh, okay. So I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this to get loved, which means I have to control to get love. If then, if then, if then. So that is what causes that relationship.
Wow. So, Sherry, with what you've been through in your younger years and everything, what was kind of like the turning point that really helped you move from surviving all of that
Mhm.
to thriving and healing? And was there something significant that happened in your life that you were like, I feel like I'm at a spot where I'm really doing well, or I'm really thriving. I'm healing and it feels really nice. Or is this just kind of an ongoing process that you continue to do?
Well, I think it's an ongoing process for sure, but I also think that the turning points were the first time I went to therapy, staying in therapy with different therapists and getting their different perspectives. Um, I think there were a lot of things. I think having a strong meditation practice and learning the precepts of Buddhism was really eye-opening. I think a lot of our religions are narcissistically based, especially the Judeo-Christian ones, because they're controlling, they're punitive, their women are often cast aside or put in roles that we don't want to be put in. So there's control over our bodies. So I think really breaking out and having my own spirit, developing like different spiritual awarenesses, Hindu practices, and just, I mean, most of those practices, including Buddhism, doesn't even believe in a God, but most of those practices teach you that you control your life, right? And that there's God inside of you. God isn't outside of you, God's inside of you. So it begins to, trigger questions. And then I go into more therapy. And then I find out, then I admit that I'm a lesbian. And I'm married to a man with 2 children. And at age 45, I come out. So that was a whole journey in and of itself. But that journey can only be taken if you have, and for me, very strong roots in who I am, in the spiritual practice, in understanding my thinking, and having a good support system, right? A good mental health support system. And those are turning points. Those were all big turning points for me. So it's gradual. It doesn't happen overnight. But really having somebody that sits down and explains, so you were raised by narcissistic parents, and so this is what happens when you're raised by narcissistic parents. And then if you don't have that opening, you're just going to keep attracting the same cycle over and over again: narcissistic bosses, narcissistic companies, narcissistic partners. It's ongoing. You become a narcissist, or even if it's a mild narcissist and codependency. So I would say that those are the primary, and I have to say joining, which my therapist told me to do, joining a 12-step codependent group was transformative.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You mentioned narcissism in the workplace. Can you talk
Yes.
more about that?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, we think that I am a career transitions counselor, so and a recruiter, right? So again, both worlds, both sides of the world. And so what I know from working with thousands of people around their careers that is that people separate out their personal life from their professional lives, which is impossible.
Yeah.
You can't actually do that. You know, especially if we spend 8 hours to 10 hours, or if you're in tech, 15 hours a day at a job, and then you come home, you can't separate the two. But our culture has separated the two. So I have seen clients who get really healthy in their personal lives and get their act together there, but are still living the day-to-day function of their work lives. And they think it doesn't matter, but it does matter because they're miserable there and then they go home. So it shows up in, well, first of all, I think most CEOs are probably narcissists, right? And I think men and women. And that's just because they don't give a shit about what anybody thinks. And they're very focused on their goals and they accomplish them. That's why most of the presidents of the United States are narcissists because they're very, not much gets in their way and they don't give a crap about what other people think and they'll do whatever they need to do to get things done. So if we don't have some understanding of our own wounding, then we begin to just perpetuate the same experience in our work as we do in our personal lives. So
Mhm.
you get the same narcissistic boss and you get the same narcissistic coworkers and you have um and I mean I can take a step back just for a second and give you a good example. I can tell based on how mostly women, I've only had this happen one time and it was a young man actually. But most women when I'm talking to them, I know if I can guess that they have been sexually abused by how they talk about work.
Interesting. How is that?
Yeah.
How,
There are key phrases like, I'd like to get out, but I have no control. He dominates me. He controls me. There's key phrases, right? Like, I try to get out, but I can't. It's the same repetition. They sound trapped when they're talking, and they're anxious about it, right? So it's not like he's an asshole and I got to get out. That's not what's happening. Like these people really believe that they cannot exit the situation, that they are powerless. And so when I hear this, I will question them. I'll say, and exactly what we're saying right now. So I am wondering if you have a history of sexual abuse or sexual trauma. And most of the time it's yes. Sometimes it's no, but there's other unhealed trauma in which they were in a position of not having power, perceived power. And that permeates. And
That's
so in those
important too.
cases, I'm sorry.
No, so that's important though that you said that. It's interesting because one of the biggest questions, I do a lot of work too. I'm a guardian ad litem and I do a lot of work with women who are in addiction and trafficked and things. And
Hmm,
that's one of the things that people will comment on is, well, why doesn't she leave? Why does she keep going back? And how frustrating that is for
right.
people who have never been there and don't understand that. But what you're saying makes a lot of sense, even in the workplace when they feel like they're trapped or when they're there. And I had a young lady said to me once, and we had her in a really good place. And this was so key. It kind of feeds into what you were saying. We had her getting ready to move her into a treatment program. And she'd been in the safe house for, I don't know, 2 or 3 months. And I got a call one day, said, hey, she's gone. She's out. She ran,
Right.
which, working in addiction like I have for the last 8 or 10 years, 11 years. And you're like, oh gosh, here we go again. But I
Mhm.
finally got a hold of her a couple weeks later on a messenger on Facebook. I said, hey, just want to check in, I know you're mad at me. Well, I'm not mad at you. I just help me understand why we had you where you were and then you went. And she said, well, I learned to trust you, which one thing is scary, trusting someone. She said, but I didn't know where I was going to go. And I know this over here is bad, but I know how to survive this.
Mhm.
I don't know if I can survive where you're going to send me. I'm like, wow. I mean, that was just like,
Yeah.
that hit me so hard. I've used that example so many times.
Yeah.
Just kind of like the same thing as like the trauma and everything that you go through when you're in one of these relationships, whether it's physical or not,
Mhm.
it's still abuse.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Sometimes even more insidious when it's not physical because there's no marks, right? There's no
oh yeah, and
physical.
it's taking me years upon years, and there's still things that come up, and it's yeah.
I wrote my thesis in graduate school on how early addiction affects career development. So when you start using is when you stop growing,
Yeah.
right? So if you start using at 12 and stop using at 32, you're still at 12. So professionally and often emotionally. And people in recovery who are really will articulate, they know that this is true. People who have not learned that yet. I worked extensively in treatment centers for many years, so it was very interesting, and often with felons as well. So it's you really have to get into their mindset, and you really need to look at the early trauma. So is addiction a dual or triple diagnosis? So is it just the addiction, or is there a personality disorder there also, or a
Mhm.
mental health issue? And if there's early trauma that hasn't been treated, they're gonna go back and avoid it to the best that they can
Yeah.
because it's bad. It's really, really painful. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know that in recovery, people relapse several times, sometimes before. Yeah. And depending on the drug, it can be even a different, like heroin, brutal,
Yeah.
brutal, brutal, brutal. Yeah.
Yeah. Been through that.
So, yeah. So that's, I don't know what the question was anymore because we went
We just kind
organic.
of went off on a sidebar there, which is good. It's good because we want people to learn from this and to understand. And that is such a frustrating comment to hear from people is, well, why you keep helping her? She just keeps going back. It's like you don't understand the trauma. You don't understand where her brain is and how her brain
Right.
is firing. And, I mean, I have a story of one young lady that, all of a sudden one day, lots and lots of prayers went into this young lady, and all of a sudden one day, okay, that's it, give me the treatment. It's been 5 years, she hasn't looked back. It's
That
like,
she went into
wow.
treatment or left treatment.
No, she went into treatment and
Okay.
she's been working her recovery for 5 years now, and she's never looked back.
Yeah.
And yet then there's others that just keep going back and back and back. So it's like there's so much trauma. And I know that, I would have never thought in my situation that I could have left that situation the way it happened. I feel like it just happened the way it needed to happen, and I was out and I was safe and everything was okay. But so many women are like you said, they're trapped in that role. They're trapped at their job. So how do
I didn't
we?
say that. I didn't say they were trapped. I said they think they're trapped.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay,
I
that's
understand that.
important because I don't believe they are trapped, but they
No,
believe
no,
they're
none
trapped.
of us believe you can always do something, but in your mind in that time you feel like that.
Correct, correct.
How do we help them shift that mindset then? Because the
Right.
mindset is the biggest thing. They feel defeated and scared, and they don't have any money, and it just feels like there's no way out.
Yeah. So I think there are a couple of things we need to do. First of all, I think we need to make micro changes instead of macro changes. Like some people can handle micro changes much better than they can handle micro. So a micro change would be, let's start working on your belief system. Let's work with this idea of radical acceptance. So radical, not of how bad things are per se, but radical acceptance of this person shows you every day who they are, and they are not going to change. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can say. There's no pretzel you can twist yourself into. This person is this person,
Yeah.
and you can't do anything about it.
I think that's the hardest part in healing
Mhm.
is that radical acceptance because oftentimes I find that you look out the lens that you're looking out of. You think it's like reverse projection. You're thinking that people are going to be better than what they are. They're going to do the right thing, or be
Yeah.
the right thing. And there's like that expectation, you know.
Also an addiction. No
Yeah,
offense, but I think it's an addiction. I
yeah,
think that belief, it's the other person who talks about this is Brene Brown, and I really love how she put it because I always struggled with the conversation of, well, they're just doing the best they can do, right? So I'm
right.
like, how does a fathers stand over their 3-year-old and beat the shit out of him and think, "Ah, it's the best I can do."
Right.
Like to me,
No.
that's not possible, right? So that expression really has driven me nuts, I'd say, through the majority of my adult life until I really started practicing codependent recovery. And I loved Brene Brown's story about this because she also really struggled about it until she realized that thinking they can do better is you trying to control them.
Yeah, that's
It's
true.
control. And now think about it. If we take that back to our childhood, remember we talked about saving the parent,
Hmm.
right? Well, we have to believe that about our parent. See, when we're young, we are victims. When something happens to us when we're young, we are victims because we don't have the capacity to help ourselves and there's no other resources. So we are the victim of the parent, mentally ill parent, narcissistic parent, borderline parent, right? Addict parent, alcoholic parent. Like we really are victims. What happens though is that belief system that we are victims, and the only way we can be safe is by adapting to that behavior, anticipating that behavior, trying to figure out what that behavior is, being a good girl, being the healthy one. Like all of these things are all manipulations we do to please the person that cannot be pleased. It is a bottomless pit, and it is a bottomless pit of despair for the person who is constantly on that wheel, trying to please, trying to please, trying to please, trying to please. It's exhausting. And there's no one to please. So, as a child, that's where it starts. And that creates neural pathways in the brain. So there really are pathways in the brain. Well, if I do this, then that. If I do this, then that. So we have to really, if you want to stop the patterning, you have to start with radical self acceptance, but really radical acceptance. This human being, this is it. There's nothing you can do. By the way, same thing with children. Children come in with their own plan. They're going to do what they're going to do. You try to be the best parent you can be, and that's it. There's not much else you can do. So if you sit in, I did Al-Anon also because I reinforced Dakota. When you sit in Al-Anon meetings and you hear about parents who have 3 really healthy kids and 1 kid who's a heroin addict, there's nothing they can do. It's the path of the child. You can try, you can send them to institutions, out to the wild, into the woods. They come back, they use. Not until they decide that they're done that it's going to be done. So this idea of what you were saying, like, I know they can be better. That's you controlling them. They can't be better. That's a mistake. This is it.
Mhm.
And the funny thing is, people actually show us who they are when we first meet them. I had a client recently who told me that she was dating a guy who openly said to her, I have an avoidant personality disorder and I'm working on it. So what that means is if we're going to be intimate, I'll probably disappear for a period of time. So they were intimate. He disappeared for a period of time. She's like, I don't get it. I'm like, he literally told you. Like, I'm impressed. He knew it. He's there before it. And he did exactly what he was saying, but you're expecting something different.
Yeah.
That's control.
Psychology has come such a long way in the last 15, 20 years. And I'm so impressed by these attachment theories
Yeah.
and switching gears, narcissistic talk that we have. I mean, I worked in domestic violence field about 20 years ago,
Mhm.
and what it was then versus what it is now is so different. And the language and the verbiage that we say today, like we
Yeah.
talk about gaslighting and coercive control. None of that was mentioned
Right.
20 years ago. And so what is your thoughts on coercive control and how this
Right.
kind of ties into everything?
Yeah. Um, so radical awareness is just step one. And we understand we can't control that person. And that person actually can't control us. Not really. Like they may be able to externally control us so that we can, I mean, I want to say this that there's a distinction between physical abuse. There is a distinction between physical abuse and mental abuse, right? So if this person is physically threatening your life, then that needs to be addressed in a different way, right? Like that needs to be addressed in leaving, finding a safe house, working with the places that help women escape these situations. So I don't want to make light about any of this. Like, oh, just change your mind, change your life, which I do believe. But in certain in violent situations, I think more has to be done. In the other situations, which there's plenty of, you really have to start with your own thinking. These are like the micro changes I was talking about. So I was talking to a friend of mine who just left a marriage, and I said a very narcissistic marriage. And I said, what was the foundational thought that you had to change for you to wake up and start making changes? And she said it was, I cannot control this person. I can only control myself. That was like, that was started the twitch, this. And then this is not about me. This is not about me. Because what happens is women really believe it's about them, or their failure to control them is a negative reflection on themselves. When it's not, it's just you can't control them. You can't control anyone. I do not cause his pain or his discomfort. I can do this without him. She said that was it. She said, I can do this without him. I don't need permission.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No is a complete sentence.
Yeah.
I am not responsible for this man's or this person's happiness and emotions. I am only responsible for mine. So change always has to come inside first, right? Because they'll notice the shift and they'll do whatever they need to do to try to manipulate you to not leave. So it has to start within yourself first. So that's the first thing. You want to know, like, would I recommend, right? Is that what you were asking me? So I think you have to first look internally at your own to begin to shift your own thoughts. You have to stop being isolated. A lot of narcissists isolate their people. So while they're at work or whatever, trying to find ways to connect, finding a part-time job to start earning money, but also to get you out and into the world, finding people that will support you emotionally. If they can't do it financially, at least emotionally, and really integrating yourself back into life because narcissists will do everything they can to remove you from the day to day. Is that what you were looking for in an answer?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my brain again, I'm taking everything that you say and processing. And yeah, I mean, I think it's hard. I think when women are in these situations, often they are so emotionally, mentally, physically beat down. And your friend sounds like someone who was doing the work, right? She was already starting to
Well,
possibly,
I think for her, it started with getting a job.
yes. Well, and starting to maybe have a little bit more self-confidence and
It
feel,
was, yeah, it was doing a job, seeing that she could accomplish something and making it wasn't a very high paying job, but it was in a nice environment and there were nice people and the energy started to shift. And it was like, whoa, right? And then like I said, I think we need to start with micro changes. I think expecting people to make big changes, and it's hard to make big changes when you're being bullied all the time, right? So it doesn't have to be a gigantic leap, but it can be take a class,
Mhm.
um, volunteer, get
Yeah.
a job, start to do little things that rebuild your self-esteem. Um, Come out of the shadows,
Yeah.
right? Seek out a friend, and I think therapy is of the essence. I think having a therapist that you can go to, you can find 12-step groups, coda groups, but you are responsible for your well-being. And you really do. These are changes that can start with just a thought. Just one thought can change it. Now we can talk about a whole bunch of things about like how to manage the narcissist, the whole going gray content, conversation, how to discontinue, how to not engage. But if you have children with this person, you're stuck with them.
Yeah.
You really are stuck with them. So it doesn't always just go away, but what you do have control over is your thinking.
Mhm.
Right? And so it has to start there. And I think a lot of women who are with narcissists get to the point. I remember my therapist once said to me, I was talking about a friend. I said, my friend is miserable. Like she doesn't get out of bed. And she said, she's not miserable. And I'm like, no, she's miserable. And she said, no, you're projecting that she's miserable because if she was really miserable, she'd start to make change.
Mhm. Interesting.
It
Yeah.
was, that was, So
Yeah.
again, so there's nothing you can do, right? You've offered your assistance. I'm here. But there's nothing I can do as for a recovering codependent who thinks they can do things, but they couldn't. I couldn't. There's nothing I can do. So I can just be a support, a non-judgmental support, but that's it. There's not, and that was a very interesting perspective. That the other eye-opening was when after I got divorced and left my husband, my dad, the narcissist, wanted to come visit, and I didn't want him to come visit because he wasn't helpful. He was self-absorbed and would make my life worse. And I said, no, I want you to stay. And then he called me and he would say, your stepmom, you made your stepmom sad by not having us come. This is your fault, that she said. And my therapist said, no, it's not. She had infinite choices, infinite way to respond to this. She could have said, that's okay. How can we support you? She could say, I understand this is a difficult time for you. They could have sent money. They could have done lots of million things, but she's chosen to take the path of the victim. That has nothing to do with you.
Right.
Right. So it really does start with our thinking.
Mhm.
And that may be hard, but you know what? YouTube is filled with phenomenal speakers on this subject. Terry Cole, do you know her? Have you ever heard of
I
her?
haven't heard of her. No.
Brilliant on codependency. Brilliant. And there's tons of people talking about narcissism, how to, so even if you just went to YouTube and started watching YouTube channels. But I think it all starts with radical awareness, a radical acceptance that this person, there's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
And that's not powerlessness. That's actually empowerment.
Yeah.
Knowing that there's nothing you can do to change this person, what a freaking relief. You're
Mhm.
not responsible for them, but they will make you think they are, but that's their wounding, not yours.
Yeah, I listened to Tara Brach's.
She's phenomenal, Tara Brock.
I mean, that was a life-changing. I wish I had all the life-changing books I could talk about, but that was one that radical acceptance
Oh
was,
yeah.
and listening to her like meditations and things like
Yep.
that were very helpful.
Yeah.
And um, so I just want to rewind the conversation a little bit. So once a woman leaves an abusive situation, there is something that happens, and it's called post-separation abuse. Can you talk about that at all, and what those characteristics looks like for that woman? Like,
Well, I'm just going to be honest, I'm not familiar with that term.
oh,
Okay.
okay, okay,
But I am familiar with trauma and how it works.
okay.
Right? So physically leaving a situation is step one so that you're safe and you have space. But if you're still stuck in the cycle of trauma, if you're still reliving, if your brain is still going through that, then that's the post separation, right? And also, it takes years to recover from a narcissist. So let's just be really clear on that, right? That leaving a narcissist does not mean that you leave behind all the narcissistic wounding. Like this is your job. Your job becomes, and if you hear interviews, and I've heard lots of interviews of brilliant, highly educated women who were making a fortune and they got love bombed by this charismatic person and they went with this person and lost everything. And they'll say, I have no idea how this happened. How did this happen to me? How did this happen to me? Right? And so there's work that needs to be done. Leaving the situation does not mean that it means you've gotten yourself out of endangerment, but you are still running on trauma.
Mhm.
So the body, I mean, if you've been with anybody for 10 to 15 years or even a year to 6 months, and they've had you on this cycle, do you know what that does to your body? To the cortisol in your body, to the brain chemistry, to the heart, to the bowel, to everything.
Mhm.
It changes everything. So it takes time. It just takes time. And there's a slave master, I'm trying to think, we learned about it in graduate school and I can't think of it right now, but it's sort of like when have you ever seen a caged bird when they let them out?
They fly around the cage, right?
Well, they come
Stay
out
in the
and they
cage.
still
Yeah.
walking in the cage. They still walk like they're in the cage. If they've been in that cage for a period of time and they've forgotten what it's like to stand up like this, they're hunched over and still walking like they're in the cage,
Yeah.
right? And so you can release yourself. You still have work. You
Yeah.
still have work you have to do. So you can name it whatever you want to name it. You've been traumatized and abused for an extended period of time. And if you put yourself in that position to begin with, and didn't get out right away, that's early trauma too. Like you were predisposed to that. So it's not just the trauma from the event, it's the trauma from before the event. So there's leaving is the first step, and then healing is the next. And the healing is the journey. Does that answer your question? I mean, is that, yeah. So it's the same thing. And you see this with people who get out of prison, right? They've been in prison, in the prison system for so long, and they get out and they're like, you're free. And they're like, I want to go back in,
Mhm.
right? I knew I was going to get fed. I was cared for. It sucked, but I knew that I made friends. You know, it's amazing what people will do to convince themselves that they're okay. But again, I think that comes from early conditioning
Yeah.
because they've only gotten morsels to begin with. So morsels are okay. Morsels are a meal, a whole meal.
Mhm.
And they
It's
don't
so
know that
complex. There's so much.
there is. And we're in many ways, we are complex, and in many ways we're simple,
Mhm.
right? I mean, we're always talking about, you can name it whatever you want, but when you are born in trauma, and by the way, they are redefining trauma. That I just finished a psychedelic integration program. And they brought in all these psychologists and psychiatrists. It was fascinating. And they were updating what trauma means. So now they're saying that because we all experience difficult things all the time, right? Especially as children. So what makes something traumatic that stays with us? And the answer was lack of safety, right? So we have to go back to the person, Beth, that you were talking about. Freedom didn't feel safe. Being homeless and in a drug finding routine was knowable. She has a community. They have communities. They're very close
Oh
communities,
yeah.
right? Yep. So it looks bad to us, but it may not be so bad for her. She knows it. It's safe. It's not good for her, but people smoke cigarettes and drink booze, not good for them either. And yet they do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're complex and we're simple all at the same time.
I also think too that experience people do kind of deal with all types of different trauma. We have, if you've gone through like EMDR or any type of, therapy like that, they
Mhm.
talk about the small T's and the big T traumas.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
I also wanted to like, think about adding the second or the third one is like an evil trauma. Like, there are just traumas of like car accidents or sickness. And then
Mm,
there's traumas of, rape or
right.
something huge. Like
Circumstantial.
yeah. And then I feel like there's this other category of evil trauma that happens to people that not everybody gets that. I mean, when we talk about trauma, we think of, oh yeah, I'm gonna, constantly be dealing with this, but there is a trauma that happens that there is such a injustice that occurs with that. And so there's a lot of the population that doesn't even know what that's like. They have this kind of feeling of, not that they've seen evil like that before, or, I don't know if I'm explaining it right, but
When you say evil, are you saying that somebody intentionally goes out to,
yes, I'm
right,
I'm saying like a very sadistic,
right.
on the side of psychopath um type characteristics. When you are touched by something like that, that is not just like a small little, T trauma or a big T trauma. That's another level of soul crushing soul rape is what I'm saying. Like
So
it
I think soul
shatters.
rape is a good term, and there's still recovery for it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I still believe there's recovery for it. So, um, and you call it soul rape, it's soul loss,
Mm.
right? So it goes back to the conversation. I mean, if we were just the two of us right now, I would want to explore that with you. This idea of,
We can
uh,
talk after.
it's because, and I just was listening to a show about the difference between narcissism and sociopaths. And so, and again, it's not it's no longer DSM is no longer using sociopath, it's antisocial personality disorder, but that we can use sociopath for the sake of discussion. So, um, narcissists do what they do to get supplied by you. So they are like, imagine a vast empty hole that's trying to pull in light, like a dark hole that's trying to pull light. And you're like giving it to them, right? Until you stop. And when you stop that, they will go looking for it someplace else. It could be with your children, it could be another person, it could be something else. Sociopaths don't care.
Yeah.
They actually are doing it because they like to do it. So we
They-
could say the narcissist doesn't like to do it. The narcissist is so profoundly wounded that they're like trying to fill themselves up, and they'll do evil things in the process. So I'm not excusing it, but that's where that you were talking about the energy, right? So
Mhm.
they're out looking for the energy to be filled. So sociopaths don't care. They
Yeah.
do it because they want to do it.
Do you think we've had guests on before? And I've always asked this question because I'm just curious. I've heard a mixed bag of this, but do you think that they're born
Right.
or do you think that they're made? And I think it's nature versus nurture kind of debate, are they marinated in this whole world growing up where maybe they were like the golden child or they were, put on a pedestal by their mother or
Right.
whatever.
So
And
they believe that narcissism is made.
yeah,
Right. Psychopaths were not so sure. And even borderlines now, people are wondering more if it's actual brain damage, which actually makes sense when you have that much trauma. It affects your brain, but borderlines can heal. Psychopaths and sociopaths don't. And the belief is narcissists don't either. I'm not sure I am convinced about that. If you have a narcissist that can be remotely reflective and they are willing to look at their early trauma that established that narcissistic behavior, then there's hope. The problem is most of them won't do that. So, in my professional opinion, based on the research I've done, narcissism is made. Psychopaths is a different conversation. Borderlines, the belief is also that they're made, but that's being questioned more now.
we had a guest on last week, and she was talking about how we thought that maybe 1 or 2% of the population were like narcissistic or psychopath. And now what we're finding is those are the only ones who are truly going to therapy, right? That are identified. Really, it's about 1 in 5, is what she was saying. And so I have to agree with that. I think that there is this culture now, and we've really started to open up the doors and talk about these things in everyday conversation. I mean, if I don't hear narcissistic, in one day, it's like, oh wow, what's going on here? You always hear that term, narcissism
Right,
or gaslighting or anything like
right.
that. So what do you think is pulling like the curtains back in order for people to actually say, like there's people that are narcissistic in our family, there's
Mhm.
narcissistic people in our workplace, there's children possibly that are narcissistic or, spouses or whatever, even though children, we don't like to diagnose them until, past puberty and things like that. But what do you think is like this?
Yeah. Well,
Buzzword that's happening,
yeah.
where everybody is like a narcissist, but like
So
how,
everybody should have narcissism. So let's be clear on that, right? That we should all have healthy narcissism. We should be prioritizing ourselves, our own well-being, our own health, our own mental well-being, our own financial health. So there is healthy narcissism. What we're talking about is unhealthy narcissism. So remember, it's a continuum, right? And so we want to be somewhere where we have healthy narcissism. And then the continuum is codependency. And I think a large percentage of our female population is codependent because we've been trained to be codependent. So that's a form of narcissism also. And then we begin to go down. So why now? President of the United States, Vice President of the United States. And sorry if you don't, if you're politically aligned with him, that's okay, but they are grandiose narcissists. They don't give a crap about anyone or anything. And they're not even ashamed to admit it. They just put it out there. And I think it has raised the awareness of, wait a minute, I've got somebody like that in my life. And wait a minute, I mean that's the blessing, right? That's also the blessing of having it so blatant in our faces is that people are like, huh, that's interesting. So
Mhm.
I think that's it. We could also say social media.
Yeah.
We can say, I think that uh, I think that we get this is the psychic channel in me. I don't know if you've noticed, but like certain phrases will come through all at once from a bunch of different channels, right? So you'll hear, like, I called myself a transformational shift counselor a year and a half ago, and then all of a sudden, everybody was a transformational shift counselor. So it's just the language will come through. It's like what needs to be healed comes through at different times so that we can look at it, and it has to get really big. And I think that's what certain people do to our culture is they show us what's underneath, and that it's always been there. you know Trump may be um just out there about it, but they've all been narcissistic. He's
I,
just more overt. So
yeah.
it's just, in some ways, he's more honest about it. And
I-
he's very triggering, right? Because of his history around abuse of women and how he discusses women and how he discusses. So a lot of women who have untreated trauma are triggered by these situations. It's literally traumatizing because that's my dad. That's the priest. That's the teacher. That's the soccer coach. That's the
yeah.
Jeffrey Epstein. It's
Most of these psychopaths or narcissists or whatever get into places of power or
yeah.
places of CEO or
Mhm.
a priest, there's, I mean, the whole gamut of, pillars. I always like to hear that too. It's like, well, he was a pillar of our community, and it's often so amazing because they kind of lead a double life in some ways. They can be this really charismatic and kind healer, spiritual leader, religious leader, CEO, and do all these, wonderful things for everybody. But that's kind of only a mask, right? Like it
Yes.
kind of, they turn and then you see the real them.
But I
And
think that I think that when you are in recovery from being with a narcissist, I believe that if you're doing your recovery, you will pick it up much more quickly, and you will be able to see
I'm
through
sure.
the glamour, the charm, and really you really only need to ask a few questions. To begin it will literally disintegrate if you just ask a few quick questions like, so when things don't go your way, how do you handle it?
Mhm.
When an employee doesn't follow your directions, what's your response? When you have a dispute, how do you manage it? Narcissists, they break easily. They really do. You just have to tap just a little bit like that, and it literally falls apart. So yes, I mean, there are very few charismatic people that I take at their word now. So it's, how many coaches, there's so many coaching programs out there. Come with me. I have $1 million a year coaching
Yes,
program.
that drives me nuts.
Yeah.
And I'm
Me nuts. Like, no, you don't.
I don't buy that for a second. You know what you'd have to do to have $1 million coaching program. So it's now I call bullshit. I think that people will say whatever people want to say. And I think that as you continue to heal for your narcissistic wounding and begin to trust yourself again and begin to trust your intuition and trust your experience, you will know. And I think that as long as we are, in our wounded state and impressed by large charismatic people who look like our father and we can project all our stuff onto them, we're easily manipulated, right? But I believe that women who recover from narcissistic wounding are very powerful, and that when they really learn to trust themselves, they will smell the, forgive me, bullshit,
Right.
gaslighting when it happens. You will know it like that.
Yeah,
And
I think there's like I was saying is that there are those people that are in these communities. Like you go into
yeah.
a place like a spiritual center,
Oh yeah.
a yoga,
Oh yeah.
community. And I found this because I once had my own yoga studio and I saw how many really truly vulnerable people go there. And after class, they would share with me, like, I'm going through this really bad divorce and I need, like I've turned to my church and my church judges me for this, or, my family doesn't understand what I'm feeling. And so you're really at this very vulnerable spot with them, right? Like they're telling you they're very open, they've just practiced yoga, they have the yoga glow, they're great, and it's such an honor to hear their story. But there are often people in,
Most
wolf and
traditions,
wolf
almost all
and sheep.
traditions have it.
Yeah,
Almost all
okay.
mostly male leaders,
Yeah.
but some women, but mostly male. There is a term called spiritual bypassing.
Mm.
Are you familiar with this?
Yes.
And it's usually portrayed by narcissists. So narcissists will use spirituality on their spiritual path, but they're using it to validate their actions, to excuse their behaviors. And spiritual bypassing is insidious as far as I'm concerned. And a lot of these spiritual leaders in the spiritual community, I don't know if you remember, I don't need to name names, but there was a big controversy, and people are like, "Oh, he's sleeping with his students."
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we had,
Well,
I mean, and
yeah.
yeah, there
And
was
he's
a,
married. So, I mean, that has been happening forever. So you have to, but again, if somebody that, so what I've learned with these spiritual leaders is that you take what you need to learn and you leave the rest.
yeah.
That's it. No one is a God. No one is better than, and any teacher that tells you they are is spiritually bypassing. I have only followed teachers that say, I am your mirror. You've got God inside of you. I'm going to teach you how to listen to the God inside of you, and that's it. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. I am just going to show you who you are. That person I can follow. Anyone else who tries to dictate or, I mean, you have a lot of spiritual leaders who have written tons of books and are molesting their secretaries
Yeah.
and have a huge drug and alcohol problem. And so you get to choose. You can take the parts that resonate with you and leave the rest. But yeah,
Mhm.
it's everywhere.
I
It's
always,
insidious. It's insidious because let's remember, narcissism is pain.
Mhm.
Yeah.
If anything, I will leave you on this note. Pema Chodron, who is one of the great Buddhist teachers of our time, talks about um, idiot compassion and like strength compassion, right?
Yeah.
So idiot compassion is when you go, oh, the poor John, his mother didn't love him, or she went, and he turned out this way, and I'm going to stay with him because there's nothing. That's idiot compassion, right? Strong compassion is like, yeah, John's got a problem, and he's not doing anything to fix it, and I'm going to use the compassion to heal myself. And it's really important to draw that distinction between idiot compassion, which is thinking that our compassion is going to change someone. Compassion can change a person, but not because you're doing something, but because you're just being a compassionate person and showing them the love. And that's it. But you're not trying to change them in any way. You're just loving them.
Yeah.
Right. So if you are living in idiot compassion, you will remain stuck. But if you practice the radical acceptance and you say, this person shows me every day who he is, I cannot change him. I can only change myself, number one. And number two is to have compassion for yourself first. What do I need to do to take care of myself? What do I need? That's the question. Curiosity is the cure. I always think curiosity is the cure over everything. That if you start to get curious, even just a little bit, it begins to change the neural pathways.
I love
And
that.
15 seconds of self-compassion will change your neural pathways. That's neuropsychology. 15 seconds. So right now, if something happens and you blame yourself, like, I'm such an idiot. I can't believe I made the same freaking mistake. That keeps the pathways going. But 15 seconds of like, oh, I get it. Of course I do that. Yeah, okay, I'm going to be kinder to myself. Like that changes the neural pathway. That begins the new path.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and also just to remember micro changes. You don't have to make radical changes right away. Micro changes that change your thinking about yourself, what you have control over and what you don't have control over. And I think spiritual empowerment, being rooted in something that is bigger than everything.
I
And
think
the oxygen if you want, but
Kristen Neff had a really great book on self-compassion.
Mhm.
and really was just that was an amazing book too. Radical
Radical self-compassion. Oh
self-compassion.
yeah.
So for the sake of time, because
Yeah.
we want to be,
Yeah.
honoring your time, um, I had heard, I had seen that you often say, imagine a world where women are fully empowered.
Mhm.
What would that world look like to you? And what are the steps to get there?
I've been talking about it the whole time. I think the steps to women getting there is, we have lived under a patriarchy that has negatively affected men and women for a long time. And I think that that's disintegrating. And it took somebody really big to step in and to really say, this is the issue. And then we have to decide what we're going to do about it. So it starts with radical awareness, radical acceptance. It starts with understanding how your brain works, what happens to your brain when you're in trauma, what happens to your brain when you're under that kind of pressure. It starts with looking inside and knowing that you have the power to change from inside yourself. It looks connecting to people, connecting to community. And what do I think the world looks like? I think women will save the world because we are built differently.
Yeah.
So women are hormonally built for connection, for collaboration, and to work together, right? There's brains to go with it, but we are interested in healthy interconnectedness, right? And that is what we need to heal the world. Patriarchy is not interested in any of that. They're interested in separation, competition, um, um, I don't want to say capitalism because I believe in capitalism, but only when all ships rise together. If that makes sense, right? So and we can break it down into hormones. I mean, and then there's a whole fascinating conversation about what happens to women in menopause because their estrogen and their oxytocin drops, their testosterone increases, and this is sort of when they wake up to this radical, like, who am I and how did I get here? It's really interesting. That's why I work with women over 40 who want to change because there's this like remarkable thing that happens. So
Yeah,
I
there's a lot of
I
us
don't
going
believe
through
that
that.
only women running the show, but I think 'cause I don't believe in that either. But
Yeah.
I think that that when we follow the more feminine path of what power really looks like, that that will serve everyone. It'll serve my sons, it'll serve men, it'll serve people of different gender identities, it will serve everybody because it's not about right and wrong or compassion. It's about healthy boundaries, collaboration, and interconnectedness. And that's what the world needs right now.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
You're so right. You're so
Yeah.
right. This has been
Thank
so
you.
powerful, Sherry. Thank you.
Thank
This
you.
has been amazing. I feel like I've been in therapy for like the last 2 hours. And I want to definitely going to go back and rewatch it. It's been amazing. Thank you for taking your
Thank
time
you. Thank
today.
you for seeing my posts. There's more to come. I'm starting, actually, just before I got on here, I created to start doing a series of posts on how to break up thought patterns, simple meditations that we can do. I'm almost hesitant to use the word meditation because people usually shut down when they hear that word, but different thought pattern with different ways we can break thought patterns just through very simple, easy things. And I'm hoping that this will help do the radical changes that people are looking for. Start
Yeah.
baby steps.
Yeah.
So where can people find you?
So sherryplatt.com.
Okay.
I'm available there. You can find me on Instagram. I think it's Sherry Platt Transformation. I have a YouTube channel and TikTok.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's sherryplatt.com, or you can reach out to me at sherryplatt1111@gmail.com.
Yep.
And
And
we
we'll
will
make
put
sure we share
stuff.
all of that too.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's where
Yeah.
they can find me. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much. This
Thank
has
you.
been a great session today. I'm so
Me
excited.
too. I'm excited.
And again, thank you for watching. And this is Stronger Roots, and we're a 501(c)(3), and we are here to bring awareness and to bring others together and empower women and men. And we're just here to heal and bring the awareness. Thank you so much for being here today. We'll talk
Thank you.
soon.
Thank you. Take care.